For this strengthen and stretch quickie, you'll need your yoga mat, a block or ball, an exercise band, or some soup cans. Make sure you have water nearby, and please only do this workout if you've been cleared for exercise postpartum. Okay, let's get started. So we're going to come to a comfortable position on your back. Your feet are going to stay on the floor, and we're going to start off with a couple belly breaths here. So get your head nice and comfortable. You're going to take your hands to your abdominal wall, and we're just going to inhale through your nose. And then exhale through your mouth. Feeling the breath. Inhale. Exhale, let it go. Good. So expanding through the ribs here. So we get to use the diaphragm a little bit more. So we want to inhale through the ribs. And then exhale, imagine the sides of the waist coming together. Good. And again, we're just breathing. We're not bunching or pulling in. And from here, we're going to add a little bit more work in the pelvic floor after this breath. Good. So we're going to take your pubic bone up towards your belly button. So we inhale, fill the rib cage with air. And then as we exhale, just lift your pelvic floor and feel your transverse abdominis connect just a little bit more. So inhale through the ribs. Imagine lifting through that pelvic floor, just like riding up an elevator. It's not a Kegel. And then inhale, release. So super nice and controlled here. And we're just going to do one more belly breath. You can place one hand on top of your abdominal wall. You can place one hand underneath the small of your back. You're going to inhale, fill your belly with air. And then as you exhale, we slightly tuck the pelvis under, pressing into that bottom palm. And then when you're ready, release your hands once you kind of feel it. So same thing, stick with the tilt. Inhale, tilt the pelvis forward. Exhale, tuck it under. Going with the breath so you can see this a little bit more. Inhale. Exhale. Good. So we can kind of release the spine just with the pelvic tilt and just going with the breath. And you'll feel the abdominal wall contract without doing any of that bunching, pulling in, drawing in maneuvers. Nothing fancy. It's just with breathing. So when you're ready, we're going to take it to our pelvic floor press. So your hands come about an inch underneath your knees. So inhale. Exhale, knees come into your hands, and I want you to really press your hands into your knees as you're doing this so you can feel it a little bit more. And then breathe, exhale, press, and then inhale, release. Exhale, lifting through that pelvic floor, pushing knees into the hands. You might feel your abs shake a little bit. That's another way to know that you're doing it right. And then just one more. Good. So great way to tone those pelvic floor muscles and get nice deep into the abdominal wall without a bunch of crunches or anything like that. So from here, we're going to grab onto our block for a quick glute bridge and give it a nice little grip. So we get to tone the inner thighs here as well. So your hands are going to come down by your side, and we'll just gently lift up into the glute bridge, inhaling at the top. And then exhaling, slowly controlling each individual vertebra on the descent. So inhale, slight pelvic tilt. Exhale, pelvis tips under, coming up to a nice neutral spine, engaging through the glutes and the hamstrings. But when we use the breath here, so that pelvic tilt into the pelvic tuck and just gently lifting, you'll notice you'll feel it a little bit more in your low back, but a lot in your core as well. So the breath is mostly there just to help you protect your spine, but really connect to this exercise as well. And just imagine a string of pearls gently rolling down on your mat. And then exhale, slight tuck up into the glute bridge, keeping the back neutral here. So we don't want to lift the hips and like thrust the hips forward like I just did there. We want to just keep the spine nice and neutral. So we're just going to do a couple more. However it feels comfortable. If you want a little bit more work in your inner thighs, you can always engage that block a little bit more. And just make sure you're really connecting to that breath. So again, exhaling. If you want to engage the pelvic floor a little bit at the top, that's totally fine. Just make sure we exhale and release all the way down. So when you're ready, release your block. We're going to take it into a little stretch. So you're going to extend your right toes towards the floor, grab onto your left knee. And then keeping your head on the floor, we're just going to switch legs. So inhale, prepare. Exhale, switch. Nice, slow, controlled. Inhale, release. Exhale. Good. If you want a little bit more of a challenge, you can lift your head up off the floor. However, if you're in the early weeks, months postpartum, if you know you have a diastasis, please keep your head on the floor for this one, and just focusing on opening up the back of the legs and stretching out the low back. But once you're a little bit further along, you can definitely lift your head up, just as long as we aren't creating that bunching, pulling, or pressure feeling in the abdominal wall. That's just one way to progress it. And then you're going to take your knees directly over your hips into a windshield wiper. So knees come over to the floor, and then gently exhale, bring the knees back over. So inhale, float the knees over. Nice stretch through the obliques, side body. And then exhale, bring the feet back in. And this is one way to modify it. Again, if you have a diastasis, if you're post C-section, or if you're just tight, you can always take your toes down to the floor, lifting your heels. And then again, inhale, float over. Exhale, gently lift up. And if you want to hang out and enjoy this as a stretch, you're totally welcome to. So we'll just do a couple more here. Your feet can be off the floor if you want more of a challenge. But again, if you start to feel that bunching or pressure in the abdominal wall, if it doesn't feel good, just scale it back and bring it back here. And then if you want more of a challenge, you can grab onto your block, place it one more time between your knees, and then gently release your toes over to the side with your inhale. And then exhale, lift straight up. So ideally, your knees stay over your hips. A lot of times when we feel really tight, or if we're just not there yet, the knees will kind of peek in towards the chest. But try to keep your knees directly over your hips. That way we have a lot more control, and you will feel the difference. So this is a great way to connect to the side body here, but again, still working into that core, so we're not creating over-dominant obliques. And the way we do that is to stay with the breath. So when you're ready, we're going to take it into a double leg extension. So block is going to come between the feet. Again, if you're using a pillow, just make sure that your hips stay in alignment. So you can place your head on the floor for this one. You're going to inhale, float your heels down an inch. Exhale, bring them back in, keeping the spine nice and neutral. Inhale, lower. Exhale, lift. So we want to avoid that pelvic tilt position here. If you need a little low back support, you're welcome to take your hands underneath your hips if it feels good. And again, once you start to get a little bit stronger, you can lower your knees, or your heels towards the floor a little bit more. But again, you can do this with a centimeter distance, and you're still going to feel it. The last thing we want to do is kind of pop out of alignment here. So you'll see as my feet start to lower and my abs start to pooch up a little bit, that would be a sign to scale back. Final progression here, you can take your hands behind your head. Inhale, float the heels down. Exhale, lift up, looking at your toes. You can also look at your knees or your abdominal wall. But again, look for that abdominal pooch. That starts to happen. If that starts to go into your low back, generally that's a sign to scale back. So let's take a little happy baby here. Just float your knees side to side. Get any tension out of your low back. And when you're ready, cross one leg over the other, taking tension out of the low back and spine. And you can either grab onto your knees or you can grab onto your hamstrings, whatever feels more comfortable. And then switch sides. We'll just take 2 breaths here. In through the nose, out through the mouth. In through your nose, and out. So from here, we're going to take it into some of my favorite back and glute exercises. So you might want to grab a band, make your way onto your belly. We start off with your arms stretched out in front, legs straight back behind you, and we're going to switch alternating, reaching your right leg, then your left. Good. So we alternate lifting fingertips and toes. Inhale as you lower. Exhale, protect your spine as you lift. And then from here, you can take both hands in. Inhale, stretch your fingertips out, keeping your toes on the ground, melting the elbows back into the ribs. And let's do a couple more from here. So inhale, come forward. Exhale, pulling the shoulders back into their sockets with the breath. And then from here, if you want a little bit more of a challenge, you can grab onto some water bottles or your band. You want to give yourself a nice strong double wrap. Reach your fingertips out in front and then squeeze the band. So we're pulling the band apart into the chest and then inhaling as you come all the way back down to the floor. So exhale, lift, pull the band apart. Inhale, lower. The slower you go on this one, the more you're going to feel it. And then you can make it harder by taking your hands a little bit closer together. On your wrap, you can make it a little bit easier by taking your hands a little bit further apart. But one of the great ways, one of these simple exercises that we can do to kind of combat all the breastfeeding, all the anterior movements that motherhood entails, like bouncing kiddos and carrying them around all day, which is why this is one of my favorites. So when you're ready, you can just release your band, and then we're going to take it back into a child's pose here. And if you like, you can grab onto a yoga blocker ball and just place it underneath your hips. If you're using a block, feel free to use whatever height works best. It's just to support the hips so we get a little extra bolster in this pose so we can go a little bit deeper. And then from here, we're going to thread the needle. So take one arm underneath your opposite shoulder and then start to walk your fingers towards the top of your mat and out to the side until you feel a nice deep stretch in the back of the shoulder. And then press into that top palm and release. Other side. And then just start to walk it out. See if you can get some little extra length, especially in the low back and hips here, using that yoga block or ball. And when you're ready, go ahead and release that. You can grab onto your block, place it out to the side. And we're going to go into one of my favorite glute exercises, which is really important to help stabilize the pelvis postpartum. But you basically just let your head come to a comfortable position on your mat. You're going to bring your knees as wide as your yoga mat. Your heels come together and we just lift the kneecaps up. It feels a little awkward the first time you do it. So try not to come into your head and your neck. I want you to just focus on squeezing your cheeks together, isolating those glutes to help lift your knees up off the floor. And again, try to keep your heels in towards your hips as much as you can. So that way you feel this less in your hamstrings and more in your glutes. And then we will stretch that out. Come into a downward facing dog. Spread your fingertips nice and wide and just kind of root into your shoulders. And we're going to pedal out the calves here. So just gently release your tailbone up to the ceiling. And then try to make your heels make their way all the way down to the floor. And then just soften the knee, switching side to side. Thus. And then we'll take a forward fold. So heels come out in front. Flex your feet. Inhale, breathe your fingertips up towards the ceiling. And then exhale into your forward fold. And then just go for that relax in. Inhale. Exhale, go a little deeper. And then gently bring your way up into a seated. So stretch. So bring your knees nice and wide. And again, coming into that forward fold, just totally release into your hips. Again, they tend to be super tight. So feel free to hang out here a little bit longer if you need to. Otherwise, we're going to come to a comfortable seated position. Take a little spinal twist. So you can just stick one leg out in front, cross your opposite knee to your opposite shoulder. And then we're going to inhale, grow an inch taller. Exhale, twist an inch deeper. Let's try that on the other side. So we get a little bit of the low back stretch, but we also get a nice outer hip stretch here. This is a great one if you're tight. And then if you're ready, go ahead and release. We're going to come into a comfortable seated position. And then breathe your fingertips up towards the ceiling. Exhale into a chest stretch. So fingertips come back, head comes forward. See if you can reach your fingertips towards the ceiling. And then go ahead and release it. Inhale, reach your fingertips up one more time. This time, interlace the fingers, bring them in front of your body. Drop your shoulders. Inhale, and then exhale, release. Good. A little bit more of a neck stretch here. So just roll out your shoulders, release them down, and you'll just let your ear connect to your shoulder, and then gently let it roll around. If you need to hang out in one spot, if you're a little tight, feel free to do that. And that is it for today. Thank you guys so much. If you have any questions, hit me up.